All right, so Mike, I'm gonna let you go ahead and set this up, man, because you was the one who kind of made me aware of the report from Mary Kay Cabot. We got the actual quote from Mary Kay in her article. Go ahead and cook.
Yeah, I just think for this conversation about Nick Chubb, it is important to give you exactly what Mary Kay said in her article yesterday. So we're all coming from this from the exact same standpoint. No one could misconstrue or misinterpret where we are getting our information from and what we're kind of reacting to, because Mary Kay wrote a piece yesterday on the Browns' 4 biggest free agents, and this is what she had to say about Nick Chubb, which led to some people getting very upset. From Mary Kay's article yesterday, quote, "It's the end of the Nick Chubb era in Cleveland, and it's a sad day. It has to end this way. The face of the franchise since he rumbled through the doors in 2018, Chubb should have finished his career with the team that drafted and developed him, but the crushing knee injury thwarted those plans, like Joe Thomas before him. Chubb truly meant it when he said he wanted to finish his career in Cleveland. He's orange and brown through and through and would have never considered asking to be traded." That continues. "Chubb has stated unequivocally since late in the season that he wanted to come back, but it's probably not going to happen. The Browns gave him last season to return from the injury, make more than $2 million, and walk away with some grace and dignity despite being a shadow of his former bruising self. But Chubb, a freak of nature with superhuman traits, has vowed he'll be better in his second season from the 2 surgeries, and some teams are likely willing to give him a chance. Here's hoping Chubb, who embodied everything good about the Browns, finds a great new home and finishes his career on a strong note." End quote from Mary Kay Cabot.
Let me tell you guys, I went completely bananas on my podcast about this yesterday.
Rightfully so.
I mean, this morning, and it'll be out later today. And on my podcast, I was dropping F-bombs, so you're going to want to watch that later in the day. You already know, and I'm sorry to tell you this, and I know there's a small percentage of the fan base that thinks I root against the Browns, and that's okay. You have to believe what you want to believe. Let me say this. The Browns have once again solidified that they are the worst organization in professional sports. If you make a win-loss column, you know how sometimes when you're deciding about a new job, right? You're deciding about buying a house. You're deciding about buying a car. Director Steve just got a new car, right? Sometimes when you're making these decisions, you may sit at home and you may make a positives and negatives checklist. Should I move to this town? Here's the positives of this job. Here's the negatives of this job. Well, if I make a positive and negative checklist about the Cleveland Browns, I got 1,000 things in the negative list. I've got one thing in the positive list, and that's that the owner's willing to spend money. That's it. The only thing I got in the positive column about the Browns is that they're willing to spend money. Now let's take a look at Nick Chubb. Nick Chubb, I've only got things in the positive list. Nick Chubb is the player that every fan wants 53 Nick Chubbs. I don't know how many times I've asked the question to a media member. I don't know how many times I've asked the question to former players and current players over my years covering the Browns here in this city. If you had 53 Nick Chubbs, how good would your team be? He does everything the right way. Everything. There are literally no exceptions. There's literally nothing I can say bad about Nick Chubb. The man eats, sleeps, breathes football. When he's not playing football, he's thinking about football, or he's doing something positive in the community. He's never out. He's never in trouble. He never showboats on the field. He never does anything wrong. He is the epitome of what every fan wants as a football player. Now, last year, he wasn't very good on the field. We all understand that. And there's a chance, might be a better than 50% chance, might be an 80% chance, that Nick Chubb is never going to be a great player again. I hope that that's not the case, but there's a chance that's going to be. But the Cleveland Browns, a team that spends money like it's going out of style, the Cleveland Browns, a team that has wasted more cash than any team in the history of professional sports. You are telling me that they can't afford to pay a few $1 million to keep a guy who should be Myles Garrett. And listen, I'm not killing Myles Garrett. Myles Garrett is humiliating the Cleveland Browns across the country, going on every friggin' radio and TV show he can to humiliate Jimmy Haslam, Andrew Berry, and Kevin Stefanski, talk about how useless the organization is. He is crushing them, and they won't trade him. I understand they're not equivalent in terms of players right now. I get it. The Browns don't care about character. They bring in one bad guy after the next. They don't factor that in at all. You know, Theo Epstein, the great GM of the Boston Red Sox and the Cubs, said, I was a big nerd and I believe in analytics. And so do I. Everybody that's watched this show, you've listened to me on the radio, you know I love analytics. I get it that football is a business. But you know what? Theo Epstein said, I didn't become a great GM until I realized you can't just be about analytics. It's got to be about heart and the person too. The great GMs have the mix of the numbers and the players. Nick Chubb is a unique individual. I understand there's some players that need to be cut for business reasons. I understand there's some players that you got to move on from for business reasons. This franchise and Jimmy Haslam, you have crapped all over this fan base. You've raised ticket prices. You've produced one playoff victory in over a decade. This is one of the best players in the modern franchise history. As I said, he does everything right. Guys get in his face. Guys dirty tackle him. He does nothing. He drops the ball. He gets back in the huddle. He is a winner stuck with a bunch of freaking losers on this team. And if I were Nick Chubb, and I'm not the man that Nick Chubb is, he's better than me. If I were Nick Chubb, I'd want to get the hell out of here. But lo and behold, this guy, this beautiful guy, wants to be a Cleveland Brown for life. But no, we piss away all this money on one scab after the next, but you can't pay $4, $3, $5 million for the best modern running back in the history of the franchise, a guy who's only not going to get in the Hall of Fame probably because of this injury, a great player who, when healthy, played at a Hall of Fame level behind terrible teams with no quarterback and no help, and at times looked like the greatest running back in the history of the sport. And now you're going to let him go put on another uniform? That's an absolute disgrace, and everybody on the Browns should be 100% embarrassed that they've allowed this to happen. I don't care about business. What cap? The Browns are going to stink next year anyway. Who cares what the cap situation is? Is Nick Chubb going to be the difference? Is spending $5 million on Nick Chubb, and I don't even know it would take that much, going to be the difference between the Browns being able to put together a good team or not? Or they can't sign another stupid over-the-hill defensive lineman? You are disgraceful. You suck Jimmy Haslam, you suck Andrew Berry, and you suck Kevin Stefanski. This is a disgrace. It's a disgrace to the fans, and it's going to be even worse if Nick Chubb signs with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Disgusting. I'm fed up with this friggin' team. It's awful. No excuse for this.
Well said.
Well said.
Well said.
Except the Jimmy Haslam part. You do a great job with me. Outside of that, well said.
So Bull covered a lot of it in a 6-minute rant, and now that we have Plus on Twitter, Bull, we can put that whole rant together. So Ant, make sure we cut that whole rant.
Well,
first time we can use the whole thing. But my point going into this was, other than I agree with almost everything you said, I actually don't have anything I disagree with.
No.
If you took the name off the jersey,
Yeah.
and you look at it from just the standpoint of you have a 29-year-old running back who's about to turn 30,
Of course.
coming off a second serious knee injury, who wasn't good last season, and said, we're going to let him walk, no one would have an issue with it.
That's right.
No one would have an issue with it.
Yeah.
But Nick Chubb is not a nameless football player.
Yeah.
Nick Chubb means something to this city. I'm not from Cleveland. You guys know that.
Yeah.
When I got here, the first person that everyone I talked to said, who's your favorite Cleveland athlete? The answer was Nick Chubb.
That's right.
And the second answer was Nick Chubb. And then the third answer was Nick Chubb. And then you sprinkle in a Jose. Donovan hadn't gotten there yet, so he wasn't there. There were some miles. But this is a team and an organization that could use any ounce, and I mean any ounce of good PR right now. Tyvis, you can exclude yourself from this conversation as a paid member of the Cleveland Browns organization. But between the Deshaun Watson trade, between the disastrous 3-14 season, between the constant back and forth in the fan base between Baker Mayfield and Joe Flacco, we can't get anything on the same page together. They could use any semblance of good karma and good PR. And for Mary Kay to come out there, and I respect Mary Kay, if she writes what she wrote yesterday, I don't think she's just making that up.
No.
To start the column with, it's the end of the Nick Chubb era in Cleveland, it makes no sense to me. And there is a chance, I do want to say, there's a chance that the Browns are letting Nick Chubb go test the market, set your price, and we'll come back and match it. There's a chance it could happen. That's not what I got from reading how Mary Kay wrote the article yesterday. And if they're not willing to your point, spend Who, $3 million? It's not like Nick Chubb's going to get $15 million on the open market.
Of course not.
If they're not willing to spend the minute, it could be close to a veteran minimum contract. Hell, they should be overpaying to keep Nick Chubb here because he means something to this franchise. And when they come onto the field next season with a brand new quarterback, with a brand new running back room now, and Deshaun Watson still on the roster, and the potential of Chubb, Bitonio, and Myles Garrett it's just going to be as bad of optics as you could possibly imagine. It's a disgrace and just a decision I don't understand from the Browns' standpoint.
Well, I agree with a lot of stuff that both of you guys said, but the difference is you guys are putting your personal feelings in it. As of lately, I've been in a business mindset, as you guys know. I've been in a very business mindset, and I just look at it as business, One, I look at it from a personal standpoint. I'm with you guys. It's nothing you would want Nick Chubb to be in there, even if you drafted a running back in the second or third round. Like, you still want them to be around Nick Chubb because I think he's a great teammate. I think that the way he carried himself and how he was on the field and the hard work and dedication, you want your younger guys to see that. They want to learn from a guy who was considered the best running back in the NFL at once upon a time. And he can share those things. So you would be grooming the next guy. However, the production just isn't going to be there. And I think that they're looking at it like he's coming off the knee injury. He broke the foot. And it's like it seems to be now.
But it's so little money.
I understand that, but I'm saying to them, they're probably thinking to themselves at this point, maybe they look at him as damaged goods. Like, okay, so it was the knee last year. Now it's the foot this year. What is it? The hamstring the next year? Like it could be. They think that his body is.
But if you look at the culmination of the running back room, you got Jerome Ford, who's a 5th-round rookie, making nothing. You're probably going to draft a rookie making nothing, and you sign Nick Chubb you could be spending $5 million on the entire running back room next year.
Again, like I said,
I get what you're saying.
From a personal standpoint,
I
understand that.
Not everything. Okay, then if everything's about business,
it is.
Then let me talk to you.
This is just the cold nature of the NFL.
Browns fans.
It's cutthroat. You can't. Yes, he's beloved. You know what? Last year it was a perfect example because they could have cutthroat the whole thing and said, "Listen, we only giving you $1 million."
Really?
They could have.
Fine.
They could.
You know what he could have done? He could have said, "Take a pay cut." As good as I've been, no, I'm going to go somewhere else.
And then we would be sitting in the same position that we are right now.
So that was a slap in the face to ask him to take a pay cut. A player of his stature.
They could, like I said, they were generous with the.
They were not generous.
Yes, they were.
And he was generous.
Because it could have got really bad.
Let me tell you something. Every Browns fan, and I know you're not going to listen to me, but you should. You should treat the Browns as a business. You pay to go to Browns games, right?
Yeah.
You pay. You're supposed to be entertained. The Browns don't entertain you. More often than not, they let you down. They suck. They're terrible. They've won one playoff game in the Jimmy Haslam era. One. They haven't gone to the playoffs in consecutive seasons since some of you were born. So why spend any money? If it's all about business, the Browns are cutting Nick Chubb for business, then fans need to treat the Browns as a business.
And I also think
and take your emotions out of it and don't buy season tickets.
But if
anybody that's buying season tickets, the Browns are ripping you off. You are being ripped off. Your money's being stolen by the Cleveland Browns to supplement Jimmy and his rich cronies. Don't give him any money.
To counter Ty's point, though, entering last season, the Browns were coming off a playoff appearance and thought they had a chance to compete. Right? They genuinely thought they had a chance to compete last year.
The world
we all did. I know you didn't pick them to make the playoffs.
Yeah.
You were right.
Except Bull. Everybody else was except
you
Bull.
thought they could be at least competitive, and we all thought they'd be another playoff team.
I didn't think they'd be this bad, of course.
The cap dollars that they saved and/or would have saved if they not re-signed Chubb could have gone to a player they thought could help us put us in a better position to compete for the playoffs. Mm-hmm. I know Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are on the hot seat, and they have to be looking at this season as we need to win or we're getting fired. But I can't imagine that whatever money that Nick Chubb is going to get in the open market compared to who they could use that money to help sign, especially in a position like running back where they currently have no depth whatsoever, is the difference in a team now that has no expectations of competing next year.
First of all,
it's just different scenarios.
Wait a minute. First of all, what made Nick Chubb is the ability to make the first guy miss. Our offensive line, we talk about how great this offensive line was a couple of years ago. No, they weren't. Nick Chubb was still getting contacted in the backfield. They were better,
but you're
for sure. But Nick Chubb was getting tackled. He was making people miss in the back.
He's one of the greatest
To me, right now, the way they look at it is last year he didn't have that ability to make that person miss.
We all understand that.
Okay.
Nobody's arguing
So
with you
what
there.
I'm saying is they still, even if they brought Nick Chubb back, that offensive line still ain't fixed.
We're not saying sign Nick Chubb to win. We're saying sign Nick Chubb because he's one of the very few players, and certainly one of the only good player the Browns have had since Joe Thomas that actually wants to be here.
Have you heard the phrase that nice guys finish last?
Tyvis, I think it's more about morale, though. Because you got a situation.
It's a pathetic state of affairs in our country.
I understand the morale and all that. Listen, I love Nick Chubb, too. I'm mad that he leaving, too, because I want him to stay, too. But from a business standpoint, I 100% get why they're moving on.
A couple things.
First I 100% get that.
Like, it's not a done deal, but based on how this article looked, it looks more likely than not that Nick Chubb won't be back. But to everybody's point, I think it's more about morale, right? The Browns are now in no position to be a competitive football team that's going to go out here and contend for anything. And I think that writing is on the wall. But you also have a culture problem. And when you make the decision that you're not going to invest in Cleveland's favorite son, it does nothing to help the culture. Now, granted, he has the injuries and he's 29 and the business side of things says one thing, but for certain people, I believe certain exceptions have to be made.
That's
and
right.
in the Cleveland Browns situation, when you have a bad team and a bad culture, you need to do something to stabilize one or the other. And Nick Chubb stabilizes the culture.
Earl, let me ask you this. We all think the Browns are going to draft a quarterback at number 2. Who would be a perfect guy to have in the locker room for a young rookie quarterback to see? You want to get beloved in this city? Obviously, winning will do that for you, but you want to see how to act and become this city's second son, third son? Who's a great person to look at and follow in that motto?
That's right.
Is Nick Chubb not the perfect guy for that role?
And what? There's no chance Nick Chubb can't bounce back from an injury? It's not like he's 35. I mean, Derrick Henry was still great at 31. It's a lot of guys, it takes an extra year to come back. You're telling me at the very least he couldn't be a good blocker? Or couldn't be a good short yardage back?
A good mentor to the rookie running back they draft?
And yes, and as you said, protection and someone to lean on for the quarterback. Nick Chubb, again, I mean, the whole thing's ridiculous. I mean, think about this. You have the three guys that have been here the longest on this team. Myles Garrett wants out in the worst way, and the Browns are saying, we're not going to let you go. So he's going to be in the locker room, if he's here, pissed off, setting a terrible tone. Joe Bitonio.
That's not necessarily true.
You don't think so? You don't think he's going to be pissed off?
I don't think Myles has a problem with the players.
Well, no, I'm not saying he's a problem.
So that, like,
but he's going to be pissed off.
From that. But when you're around the players, I'm not going to be like. He's still my guy.
The players know he spent the whole offseason embarrassing the team.
Yeah, but like I said, at the end of the day, like, yeah.
But don't you think that's bad for the culture?
You think they're not hanging out with Myles?
I think you guys are both right.
You saying I'm saying you think Cleveland Browns players is like, hey Myles, we ain't kicking it no more.
No.
That's what I'm saying. Like
I'm just saying if your best player doesn't want to be there, doesn't that do something to the other players? Like, well,
I mean, you'd be like,
the question is, he really.
Well, the thing is, everybody probably understands why he's saying what he's saying. But, like, if they're not going to trade him and he's going to be here, it's like, all right, well, we might as well.
I got a question for you all.
Go ahead and rock.
2 more questions on this before we get to our guest.